From being abducted, imprisoned, tortured, and abused by a psychotic serial killer to having induced love into him, an 8 years old actually taught a child predator how to love. However, while she struggled to save her life, the situation became increasingly difficult for her. Why did this occur in the first place? Is she going to make it through this alive? If you want to know what transpired in this dismal story, you need to keep watching to the very end. Now pay a great deal of attention to the video footage that shows the little girl and the man walking together. In the eyes of onlookers, it appears to be a kind parent purchasing a can of soda for his child at a convenience shop. Yet in reality, it is an essential piece of evidence in a horrifying kidnapping and multiple murders. When a little girl is taken away from her family and placed under the complete control of a cruel psychotic serial murderer, she clung to hope despite the fact that she was under the impression that there was no possibility of any hope at all. And who exactly is the monstrous individual responsible for this heinous crime? He goes by the name of Joseph Edward Duncan. Chronicle of the crime. Shasta's eyes, which are quite innocent, have already witnessed firsthand what this monster is capable of doing. A tragedy that occurred in 2005 involved the death of a whole family in Idaho. Along with the disappearance of their 2 younger children, this unfortunate event was brought to the attention of the public. The younger children were taken and had to live in the woods while being sexually abused and tortured in the worst ways. How was it that a 6-year-old girl was able to outwit her dreadful kidnapper? This is the story of Shasta Groan, who was able to flee and eventually tame the dreadful abuser who had wiped out her whole family. To put it simply, Shasta Groan came from an all-American family. She had 2 older brothers, Dylan, who was 9 years old, and Slade, who was 13 years old. Brenda Groan, her mother, and Mark McKenzie, her stepfather, were outstanding examples of what a youngster should hope for in a parent. In the remote area of Wolf Lodge, Idaho, the family of 5 lived together in close quarters. They had a limited amount of money, but they were comfortable with it. Despite the fact that her mother Brenda had been divorced from Shasta's father, Steve Groan, for a considerable amount of time, they remained on amicable terms. By May 16, 2005, Shasta's life would be irrevocably altered. There was surveillance going on, but the family was unaware of it. As of the 15th of April, a guy had hired a red 2005 Jeep Grand Cherokee. Another set of license plates was taken from a vehicle in Newton County, Missouri, by the person in question. On May 4th, it was reported that the vehicle had been stolen. On June 1st, the man did not appear at his trial, which indicates that he should have been arrested. However, by that time, he had already left for Idaho. He stopped at a location known as Wolf Lodge, which is located 8 miles west of Coeur d'Alene, for no apparent reason. He took a look at the family that he saw there. These are the Groans, despite the fact that it was utterly arbitrary. He had his new target. Before making his initial move, he followed them around for many days. He also made sure to give the Groans pit bull some snacks every night so that the dog would be able to know him. The family hosted a neighborhood barbecue on May 15th. The neighbor had asked Slade to mow his grass for him, but the neighbor did not have any cash on him, so he informed Slade that he would pay him the next day. Everything was going according to plan. It was 6 in the morning, and in the early mornings of spring, little Shasta had been woken from her sleep by her mother, who spoke to her in a panicked whisper, saying, "There is a man here who does not want us to be here." She was carried to the living room, where a guy in a mask was holding up her entire family with a shotgun. She was drowsy and not entirely conscious at the time. The little girl was under the impression that he was a law enforcement official, until he forced them all to lie on the ground with their faces. Zip ties and mask tape were used to bind their hands together. Taking Dylan and Shasta with him, he brought them to the backyard and laid them down beneath a tree. Fearful kids could hear loud blows and grunts of pain. Finally, a bloody Slade stumbled to the front door of the house, and the crazy man hit him over and over with a Fat Max claw hammer. He was barely alive as he slouched over the picnic table that the family had set up. The 2 youngsters were crammed into the Jeep without their will, and he then drove away. When the neighbor who owed Slade money arrived later that day, he quickly dialed 911 and reported the situation.
I went to the door to pay the little kid $10 for mowing the lawn, and there's blood all over the door. Nobody comes through the door.
All of the members of the family were found dead in the living room. In the end, Slade was able to make his way back to his mother and pass away next to her. In the case of the 2 young children, an Amber Alert was issued. As a result of the fact that Robert Roy had paid Brenda and Mark a visit on February 15th, they initially assumed that he was the one responsible for the crime. In spite of this, he was able to provide an alibi, and he even managed to pass the polygraph examination. Then, however, a strange occurrence took place. Only 2 days prior, Steve Groan had gotten into a fight with Brenda, and during the argument, he made some pretty peculiar remarks in front of the camera.
I'd like to address my children's abductors or abductor. Please release my children safely. They had nothing to do with any of this.
As if he was aware of the significance of this situation. You could be under the impression that he was involved in the kidnapping in some way. The Federal Bureau of Investigation has established a reward of $100,000 for any information on Dylan and Shasta. However, 100 miles away, at a secluded campsite outside of St. Regis, Montana, in the Lolo National Forest, the murderer turned to the two terrified youngsters and told them that he had killed their entire family with the claw hammer.
He grabbed the hammer and he said, "See this hammer?" And we said, "Yeah." And he was like, "This is the hammer that I murdered your mom and your stepdad and your brother with." And he was like, "They're not alive and you're never gonna see them again."
There was no time for the youngsters to grieve since they were so shocked. When the man became irritated, he began to toss objects all over the place. He kept the kids locked up in a cabin. The beginning of their horrific adventure was when he began to assault them, not only in terms of physical or sexual aspects, but also in terms of mental aspects. It brought him great pleasure to toy with the children's feelings. He would coerce them into drinking liquor and using drugs. Even worse, if little Shasta spoke out or cried, he would make her watch as he assaulted her brother.
He took more of his anger out on Dylan and was really mean to him.
He would abuse him and then make me watch. And then if I cried, then he would abuse him worse.
The man who kidnapped them gave them a false sense of optimism by claiming that he would release them if they did what they were instructed. Furthermore, it was not Stephen Groan who was responsible. The fact of the matter is that Steve Groan's name was cleared, despite the fact that a polygraph test indicated that he was providing false information. It was determined by the authorities that he was at his residence at the time of the kidnapping. Joseph Duncan, a sexual offender who is currently on the run, was the one who kidnapped them. He had been a rapist since he was 15 years old, and now that he is 42 years old, he has already served 14 years in prison. He was taken into custody in March of 2005 on charges of sexually assaulting a young kid, but he was able to secure a bail bond and later escaped. The atrocities that he had done to Samiejo, White, and Carmen, two sisters from Seattle, were revealed by him with a number of disturbing pieces of information. Do you find this video interesting? What are you waiting for? Subscribe to Unsolved Files if you want to see more amazing content like this, and don't forget to give this video a like and comment what you think of this man below. Shasta, the little girl, acted as if she were his best friend and managed to win him over. They were ordered to send letters to their families informing them that they would be seeing them shortly. Dylan, who is 9 years old, that continued to be a dream. Then again, Duncan continued to play mental games. He informed the children that they would be allowed to return home if they were successful in capturing a squirrel. When they finally arrived, Shasta gave her brother a hug. She was holding hands with her brother when she heard a tremendous bang and her brother's hand fell away from her. When Shasta asked Duncan about the incident, he claimed that it was an accident.
I'd just given him a hug, and so I was holding his hand, and I heard a loud bang. And then I felt my brother's hand slip from mine.
He was crying. He said it was an accident. He didn't mean to. I didn't know what the first shot was, but I knew that the second time was on purpose. He said that he did it so that Dylan wouldn't have to feel pain.
Shasta was forced to roll the body into a tarp, and then he set fire to it. This allowed him to get rid of the body. After being frozen for a week, the girl was now completely by herself. Shasta was aware that in order for her to survive, she needed to win over this beast. Duncan led her down to a lower location on the mountain site, where she could see people passing by. 6 weeks after the kidnapping had begun, the young girl, who was only 8 years old, had the intelligence to understand that if she cried for assistance, she would be put to death. Shasta struck up a conversation with him, acting as though she really liked him, and they became friends with him. Even if he seemed to want to take her home, she would still act as though she wanted to stay with him. Then she would answer, "No, I want to stay here with you." Nevertheless, even though she had followed the instructions, the cruel monster gave her a very uncomfortable choice. He had asked her to select the method of death that she would most want. Now, in the face of death, the brave young girl kept her cool and employed her wisdom. She chose to stay apart from him in an effort to postpone her own demise and discourage him from carrying it out.
He was like, just like, you have the choice to be strangled or you have the choice to be shot like your brother, and that one's gonna be quicker. I felt like if I had chose the strangulation, that I might have a chance to talk him out of what he was doing.
Shasta was on the verge of giving up after experiencing weeks of agony and losing every member of her family when the man put a rope around her neck and tugged it. However, she caught her breath and begged him not to hurt her, using his nickname in the process, and it was enough to gain his attention.
I noticed that when I would use that name with him, it would like soften a little bit, like it would soften him. And he's like, "What did you say?" And he had let go, and everything was starting to come back, and I was just really dizzy.
The man came to a stop. He could not understand why the small girl thought so highly of him or why she had treated him with such likeness. She was the one who taught him how to love, he told her. Duncan wanted to know whether she would accept living with him as his daughter. Little Shasta gave a yes response after being subjected to weeks of torture and sexual assault. They came to the conclusion that they should go see Duncan's mother on the 2nd of July in 2005. When she was so close to becoming free, the little girl requested him in a casual manner to visit her neighborhood so that she could show him the school she attended. He succumbed to her request, not thinking about the repercussions. After that, they traveled back to Coeur d'Alene and stopped at a convenience shop on their way back. It is the first time that the police have received information about the girl being seen. They visited a Denny's eatery that had a poster of her as a missing person. A man who was smoking and standing outside gave her a nod, and she gave him a nod back in a private manner. After witnessing Shasta's unclean clothes and the fact that she refused to talk without Duncan's consent, he proceeded to the counter and spoke to the waitress, who immediately sprung into action. Shortly after, the manager, Linda Olson, went ahead and placed a call to the authorities.
I've got a little girl here with a tall gentleman, and she looks so much like that Shasta, and we're not sure. I don't know.
Everyone was prepared to stop Duncan if he ran, and they were positioned near the door. The waitress, on the other hand, was acting as if she was having difficulties writing a receipt in order to delay them. Everyone who worked at that Denny's was familiar with the young girl they had seen on the posters. At the moment when the cops arrived, the entire diner erupted in cheers, and without delay, Shasta reported to the authorities that Duncan had murdered her entire family. Justice served. The authorities managed to obtain a shotgun, in addition to video footage of the children. The recorded footage was quite frightening. Duncan maintained a terrifying blog called The Fifth Nail, where he detailed all of the horrors he had done in the past. This proved to be enough evidence to find him guilty of the offense. Duncan claimed to have identified houses with kids using his GPS. He represented himself in court and acknowledged his crimes on October 16, 2006. As a result, he received 3 life sentences, followed by a death sentence. He spent his last years behind bars on Terre Haute, Indiana's death row. In March 2021, he succumbed to brain cancer. Shasta relocated to her father's home to live with him. After overcoming post-traumatic stress disorder and substance misuse, she was ultimately able to establish a life with her husband and 5 children. The story of Shasta is one of extraordinary and surprising fortitude on the part of an 8-year-old girl who not only outwits her terrible captor, but also manages to teach him a lesson that will change him forever: the ability to love. In light of the fact that she is the only member of her family to have survived, Shasta grown is a perfect illustration of how far willpower can go. What do you have to say about this story? Because it is indeed a sad one. Let us know what you think in the comment section below. But that's not all, because we are always determined to bring to your screen true crimes. Now, did you know that a guy committed horrifying acts against his own niece? Yeah. Go check out the video on your screen, the murderer's unholy desire for his daughter and niece vertical bar Derek Barrett. What are you waiting for? Go watch it now.